There was a moment when the entire apartment went silent. Not the kind of silence that felt peaceful, the kind that felt wrong, heavy, like the walls themselves had seen something they would never forget. Outside, the streets of Los Angeles kept moving. Cars rolled past red lights. Music leaked from apartment windows. Somewhere nearby, somebody laughed without knowing a nightmare had already begun upstairs. By the time police arrived, a 7-foot rapper was standing naked in the middle of the street, covered in blood, staring into the sky as if he were looking at something no one else could see. The newspapers would later call him a monster. Television turned him into a symbol of horror. Courtrooms used his music as evidence against him. But long before the headlines, before the murder trial, before the whispers of cannibalism shocked America, there was another story. A story about pain, addiction, manipulation, and a man who claimed he did not even remember the worst night of his life. Some people believed justice was served. Others believed the wrong man lost his freedom forever. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise, the truth disappeared. Before the headlines turned him into a cautionary tale, he was just a tall kid from Dallas who spent most afternoons trying to escape the noise around him. The neighborhood carried its own rhythm back then. Sirens at night, basketballs bouncing against cracked pavement, older boys standing near liquor stores talking about money like it was the only thing that mattered. But inside that chaos, he found something quieter. Words. At 7 years old, he started writing poetry in notebooks most people would have thrown away. Not because anyone told him he was gifted, because writing became the only place where his thoughts made sense. Hip-hop arrived like a window opening. The music was raw during those years. Artists spoke about poverty, anger, survival. For a young boy trying to understand the world around him, rap did not feel like entertainment. It felt like testimony. By the time he reached his teenage years, he had already started performing at small local shows. He rapped over borrowed beats, trying to sharpen his voice in crowded rooms where nobody remembered your name unless you forced them to. Back then, people knew him by another name. But everything changed once he grew into his towering frame. At 6'7", he stood out before he even spoke. Friends began comparing him to the silent giant from the Addams Family. Eventually, the nickname stayed, Big Lurch. The name sounded larger than life. Unfortunately, so would the future attached to it. Like many young artists searching for opportunity, he eventually left Texas behind and headed west toward California. Vallejo offered something Dallas could not: connections, studios, producers, and the possibility of finally being heard. The Bay Area music scene during the 1990s carried a different energy. It was creative, experimental, independent. Local legends built careers without waiting for mainstream approval. And for a hungry young rapper sleeping in garages and surviving day to day, that environment felt like hope. People around him quickly noticed two things. First, his appearance was unforgettable. Second, his voice sounded dark enough to stop conversations. Producers began introducing him to respected names within the Bay Area rap scene. Slowly, features turned into collaborations. Collaborations turned into recording sessions. Then came a group deal with MCA Records. For a moment, it looked like the struggle had finally started paying off. But success in music rarely arrives clean. Behind the studio lights were exhausted artists, street politics, gang affiliations, drugs, pressure, and men pretending to be businessmen while operating like predators. Young rappers often entered the industry believing talent alone would protect them. It never did. Even during those early years, people close to him described someone carrying physical pain and emotional isolation beneath the image. He laughed loudly, moved confidently, performed aggressively. But there were moments when he looked like a man trying to outrun something invisible. Years later, after the murder case shocked the country, many people went back searching for signs inside his music. They wanted to know whether the darkness had always been there. Maybe some of it was, or maybe America simply became more comfortable turning broken men into monsters after the story was already over. There was a time when people in the Bay Area believed he was next. Not necessarily the next superstar, but the next unforgettable figure to emerge from the underground. The kind of artist whose presence alone could fill a room before the music even started. By the late 1990s, his name had begun circulating through California streets with growing momentum. His deep voice, massive frame, and horror-inspired lyrics made him impossible to ignore. While mainstream rap chased radio hits and polished images, he leaned into something darker. Violence, fear, madness, nightmares. Horrorcore music was already controversial back then, but audiences were fascinated by artists willing to step into uncomfortable territory. Fans treated the music like a horror movie soundtrack. Disturbing, theatrical, extreme, and Big Lurch understood exactly how to play that role. On records, he sounded fearless, sometimes almost inhuman, but outside the booth, life around him was becoming increasingly unstable. The music industry he entered was not built for vulnerable people, especially not young black men carrying trauma while trying to survive inside environments filled with gang politics, addiction, manipulation, and constant pressure to appear dangerous. People often romanticized that era of hip-hop. They remembered the cars, the jewelry, the independence, the street credibility. What they rarely talked about was the emotional damage. Studios became places where artists stayed awake for days. Drug use blended into everyday life so casually that nobody stopped asking whether someone was okay. Executives wanted darker music because darker music sold records. Pain became profitable. Then came the accident. On the way back to Texas after his grandmother's funeral, a drunk driver crashed into him head-on. The injuries nearly killed him. He suffered severe damage to his neck and spine and spent time in a coma while doctors tried to stabilize him. When he finally woke up, the pain never truly left. Friends later described moments when he could barely stand because of the nerve damage. Prescription medication helped temporarily, but dependence followed quickly. Morphine became less about treatment and more about survival. And somewhere during that spiral, PCP entered the picture. At first, it was supposed to numb the pain. Then it became part of the environment around him. The people surrounding him during those years mattered more than most outsiders understood. He moved through circles where drug use was normalized, where paranoia mixed with exhaustion, where men tried to prove loyalty through self-destruction. At the same time, record labels started approaching him with contracts and promises. Lawyers became managers. Street figures became businessmen. Everybody claimed they wanted to help him rebuild his career. But underneath those opportunities sat tension. He reportedly clashed with gang members inside studios, felt threatened, felt cornered, felt trapped in agreements he no longer trusted. Instead of finding stability after his accident, his world became even more chaotic. Still, the music continued, because sometimes artists keep recording not because they are thriving, but because music becomes the last thing holding their identity together. Years later, people would replay those songs in courtrooms and documentaries searching for evidence of evil. They listened to violent lyrics and decided they were hearing confession instead of performance. But horrorcore was always built on exaggeration. Shock, fantasy, darkness turned into art. The terrifying question was whether anyone around him noticed the line between performance and reality slowly disappearing, or whether they noticed and simply did not care. The most terrifying stories rarely begin with screaming. Sometimes they begin quietly, with exhaustion, with drugs, with people ignoring warning signs because chaos had already become normal. On the afternoon of April 10, 2002, the world around him finally shattered. Inside a Los Angeles apartment, a young woman named Tanisha Issays was home alone while her children were away at school. Friends later described her as ambitious, beautiful, and trying to rebuild parts of her life that had already carried too much pain. What happened next would become one of the most disturbing criminal cases in hip-hop history. According to prosecutors, Big Lurch arrived at the apartment while under the influence of PCP. Witnesses claimed he forced his way inside before attacking Tanisha with extreme violence. By the time police reached the scene, her body had been mutilated in ways that horrified even experienced investigators. The media moved quickly. Headlines focused on cannibalism, Television networks repeated graphic details non-stop. America became obsessed with the image of a rapper transformed into a monster. But inside the center of that nightmare stood a man who later claimed he barely remembered any of it. When the effects of the drugs finally wore off, he reportedly learned that more than 2 weeks had already passed. He had already appeared before a judge, already been charged, already become infamous across the country. And according to his own statements, he still believed the world had ended. That detail stayed with many people who later studied the case. PCP intoxication had long been associated with hallucinations, paranoia, dissociation, and violent psychosis. Users sometimes described losing all connection with reality itself. But the legal system in California drew a hard line. Voluntary intoxication could not excuse murder. The courtroom became less about mental collapse and more about image. Prosecutors introduced violent rap lyrics as evidence. Horrorcore songs that had never even been officially released were suddenly played in front of jurors as if they represented his true identity. Lyrics inspired by horror films and fictional killers became part of the prosecution's narrative. To many observers, the trial felt larger than one crime. It became a referendum on rap music itself. By then, America already feared hip-hop. Politicians blamed rap for violence. News stations portrayed black male artists as threats long before they ever entered courtrooms. And for jurors staring at a 7-foot rapper accused of cannibalism, separating art from reality may have already become impossible. Then came the conviction. Life in prison without parole. The death penalty had initially been considered, but even after sentencing, questions refused to disappear. Supporters later pointed toward evidence they believed was ignored. Fingerprints that allegedly did not match. Claims about contaminated crime scenes. Allegations of manipulated testimony. Questions surrounding his legal representation. Even Tanisha's own mother eventually expressed doubts about whether the full truth had ever been uncovered. None of that erased the horror of what happened to her. Nothing ever could. A young woman lost her life in unimaginable fashion. A family was destroyed forever. But the deeper tragedy surrounding the case was how many broken systems appeared to collide at once. Addiction, exploitation, mental collapse, violent environments, media sensationalism, and an industry that often profited from destruction while pretending to condemn it afterward. And somewhere beneath all those headlines sat a haunting possibility. That the man America remembered as a monster may have also been a man falling apart long before anyone bothered to stop him. In America, the story spread faster than the facts ever could. By the early 2000s, cable television had already mastered the art of turning tragedy into spectacle. And this case contained everything the media feared most. Rap music, drugs, violence, mental collapse, and a black man large enough to look terrifying even in silence. The headlines almost wrote themselves. They rarely spoke about his childhood, rarely spoke about addiction, rarely spoke about trauma, brain chemistry, or exploitation inside the music industry. Instead, America was handed a simpler narrative. A monster, a cannibal, a horrorcore rapper who became the violent lyrics he performed. For many viewers, that was enough. The story reinforced fears people already carried about hip-hop culture during that era. News programs treated rap music less like art and more like evidence of moral decay. Politicians condemned violent lyrics publicly while ignoring the neighborhoods, addictions, and broken systems that produced so much suffering behind the scenes. Meanwhile, outside the United States, reactions often sounded more complicated. International audiences still found the crime horrifying, but many became equally fascinated by the legal and psychological dimensions of the case. Some questioned whether the American justice system had fairly handled someone allegedly suffering from severe PCP-induced psychosis. Others criticized prosecutors for using unreleased rap lyrics during trial proceedings. Documentary filmmakers eventually revisited the case with a different tone than tabloid television had used years earlier. Instead of simply asking, "How could this happen?" they began asking, "What failed before this happened?" That distinction mattered, because depending on who told the story, Big Lurch became either a symbol of evil or a symbol of what happens when addiction, exploitation, untreated trauma, and public spectacle collide inside a culture that often profits from destruction. Even today, conversations about the case remain deeply divided. Some people believe the sentence was absolutely justified and that no explanation could ever soften the brutality of the crime. Others believe a deeply mentally impaired man was turned into a permanent national horror story before anyone fully investigated the environment surrounding him. But nearly everyone agrees on one thing: the case never stopped feeling disturbing, not only because of what happened inside that apartment, but because it forced America to confront uncomfortable questions about fame, drugs, media, race, and the thin line between performance and psychological collapse. Questions that still do not have easy answers. More than 2 decades later, the story still feels unreal. Not because America has never seen violence before, but because this case seemed to consume everyone connected to it. The victim, the families, the music, the people who watched from a distance trying to understand how one human life could collapse so completely. For many older hip-hop fans, Big Lurch became a permanent symbol of an era when the industry often blurred the line between entertainment and self-destruction. Back then, Pain sold records. Record labels marketed danger because danger attracted attention. Artists were encouraged to appear unstable, violent, fearless. The darker the image became, the more valuable it often seemed. But once real tragedy entered the picture, the same industry that profited from chaos quickly stepped away from responsibility. And in the middle of that system stood broken people trying to survive. Today, Big Lurch remains in prison, still fighting for appeals, still claiming critical parts of the truth were ignored. Some supporters continue demanding another investigation. Others believe reopening the case would only reopen wounds that never truly healed. Meanwhile, Tanisha Issays remains the person too often forgotten in the public fascination surrounding the story. A mother, a daughter, a woman whose life ended in unimaginable horror. Her absence became quieter over the years while the mythology surrounding the case kept growing online through documentaries, interviews, conspiracy theories, and debates across hip-hop culture. That may be the saddest part of all. Over time, true crime stories sometimes stop feeling human. People begin analyzing them like entertainment instead of remembering the real suffering left behind. And yet, this story continues surviving because it touches something deeper than shock value. It forces people to confront uncomfortable truths about addiction, about mental collapse, about how easily vulnerable people disappear inside industries built on profit, about how quickly society labels certain lives irredeemable once fear enters the conversation. Maybe the world will never fully know what happened inside that apartment on that April afternoon. Maybe some answers disappeared forever the moment the headlines took control of the narrative. But long after the courtrooms emptied and the cameras moved on, one truth remained impossible to ignore. Some tragedies are not created in a single night. They are built slowly, through pain nobody treats, environments nobody escapes, and warning signs everybody sees too late. And somewhere behind all the noise, the music, and the horror, there is still a lingering question that refuses to disappear. Was this the story of a monster, or the story of a man who completely lost himself before the world even noticed he was falling apart? If this story stayed with you, share your thoughts below. And if you enjoy deep documentary storytelling exploring the hidden side